I'm Mario Martinez Jr., CEO and founder of Vengreso, and we are the creators of flymessage.io, the free personal writing assistant and text expander application. On each episode of this podcast, you will hear from sales leaders, practitioners, and influencers to help you grow your sales numbers at scale. So, get your pen and paper or iPad and keyboard and start taking notes as you're now listening to the Modern Selling Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Korn Ferry. Korn Ferry integrates their consultancy, Miller Heiman sales methodology, and technology to bring you Korn Ferry Sell for Salesforce and Microsoft Dynamics 365. Learn more at kornferry.com/sales effectiveness. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of the Modern Selling Podcast. And I am with you coming today with a very awesome topic. As you know, we've been spending a lot of time talking about PLG as a result of Vengreso's conversion. And today I've got none other than my friend, Jennifer Smith, CEO of Scribe, also a PLG-focused strategy. And today we're going to be spending some time talking about some really amazing things that she's done. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thanks. So excited to be here. This is a topic near and dear to my heart, so we're going to have a lot of fun.
Well, hopefully young Padawan here will be learning from the Master Jedi there yourself on some of the things that you've done and how to grow and scale. So this is actually quite exciting. But do me a favor, Jennifer. You've got an amazing story. Just talking about, coming on as the CEO of Scribe, starting to do fundraising, happened to have a component of new life brought into the world, all happening all around the same time. I read the story, it was fantastic, but just do me a favor, give us a little background about yourself and how you got to Scribe. And then I got a very important question to ask you.
Yeah. So I started my career as a consultant at McKinsey. I was there for 7 years, working mostly with big financial services and tech companies in org and ops practices. So functionally, that means going into operation centers and sitting next to agents from 9 to 5 and looking over their shoulder and watching what they're doing. And if you ever do that work, you build a ton of empathy for folks who are in those roles. Remember that next time you're calling a contact center, that is a very hard job on the other side. And B, you realize the name of the game is you figure out, who are the best people in that ops center. And you sit next to them and you just say, hey, Rick, what are you doing differently than everyone else? And they tell you, they'll say, oh, I was trained to do all of these things. And I'm dating myself. This was 15 years ago. They'll take out a thick binder and they'll thunk it down on the desk and say, this was my training manual. I had to memorize it. But I found 30 better ways to do it. And this is what I'm doing instead. Right. And we would write that up in PowerPoint and sell that back to our clients. And I always thought, like, gosh, if those people just had a way to capture what they were doing differently, they could have had a really big impact. They could have scaled what they had figured out. And I sort of said, well, that seems like a pretty obvious problem someone will solve someday. Right. And kind of filed it off in my head and went on my merry way. And was living in San Francisco, working in venture capital, and spent a lot of my time there talking to buyers of enterprise software. We talk a lot about how we sell software in the Valley. And I got really curious. How do people buy it? What's it like on the other side? What are the problems they're trying to solve? What are the gaps they're seeing in the market? What do they wish existed? And so I would literally just run around and ask people that question. I talked to over 1,000 folks to just understand, like, what do you have budget for? What's missing in your stack? And at the time, my question was like, where should I be investing in? Right. That would make this better. And I kept hearing this problem of, gosh, I have all of this know-how and it mostly just lives in people's heads and it walks out the door every day at 5 p.m. And I got to hope that it comes back. And, I try to capture it, but it doesn't really work because what's my option? I tell someone, like, take time away from selling, take time away from doing your job and write down all the things you know how to do. Or I hire some version of, Jennifer, the consultant to run around and ask them for it. And so, anyways, fast forward, this is just kind of a problem that I got really obsessed with and it sort of reached a point where I said, gosh, this seems really obvious. This is a problem hiding in plain sight. Someone should solve it. And I switched to, okay, well, maybe I should solve it. And so we started Scribe, and I guess the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, it was interesting. Tell a little about the story. You started Scribe, and you were fundraising, and then, like within months, something happened in your life. Talk about that.
Yeah, so we raised our seed round, and then I said, okay, we're good for a while. We're not going to raise money for a while, and 7 months later, we ended up having our Series A preempted. We were not looking to fundraise at the time. We didn't spend any of the money from our seed, and I was 8 months pregnant at the time that we ended up closing the round and announcing it. For anyone who's raised around, it's a kind of a scary moment. You're trying to ask yourself, am I doing the right thing by my company? Like taking on money is great, but you're also taking on dilution and sets of expectations, and you're signing up for something. And so it was very much a moment of like, is this the right thing for my company? Followed by, am I crazy for doing this now when I'm about to have my first child and I have no idea what's going to happen? And so, had some real internal debate around it. And by the way, having been in venture capital before, does anyone even want to back a pregnant founder? Because I'd never
Right.
seen that happen before either. And thankfully, it was like you couldn't see over Zoom. This was still in pandemic days, but I was very upfront, and sort of said, like, by the way, you might not be able to know, and I'm very pregnant right now, and I got a cool. Congratulations. Like, good luck with that. So let's talk more about your company. It was a really non-issue, which I was very excited to see.
That is phenomenal. So actually, when I read the story, talking about being 8 months pregnant and raising funds, that was the first thing I thought of was like, how did the market, or sorry, investors react to that? And I thought, wow, I wonder if that would be a barrier. And in your case, it was certainly not a barrier, that's for sure. And I think that's because one, you had a great product, and two, you guys actually were scaling on the application, which is quite interesting. And we're going to talk about that as well. So well done. Congratulations on that one. Because if you think about it, female, 8 months pregnant, trying to scale and raising funds, like a lot of people would look at that and say, no, 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 that's too many things against me. Right. And I love how you just like took it on and made it happen. So it's just an amazing story.
One of our just
Yeah.
one quick note on that. One of our company values, we just went through kind of a big a values exercise together, and one of them is no limiting beliefs.
Mm,
And I feel like this is an example where if you had asked me before I raised, do you think that like raising this sum of money, doing this while pregnant at this stage in the company when we still had some stuff I really wanted to prove out, I would have said no, absolutely not. And yet it happened, and it was absolutely the right thing to do at the time. So I always like coming back to no limiting belief. Like you don't know until you go through the process and try it, and you might just be surprised.
right, right. I love that. Fantastic. So you're still at Series A, that you've raised, and now we're going to spend some time talking a little bit about Scribe and your PLG strategy. But before I do that, I always ask all my guests this question, and I'm looking for something juicy, Jennifer. So think about it. Tell us something nobody knows about you, even if they're looking at any or all of your social profiles.
I don't know if this is juicy. Maybe it's more just embarrassing. But I'm like a pretty strong closet economics nerd. I actually debated getting a PhD in economics in high school when the Fed would have their quarterly meetings. I would skip school
Oh,
to
wow.
to follow what was happening. So it's something that's still a really strong passion of mine. So if anyone ever wants to riff, especially on macroeconomics, we live in a very interesting time for macroeconomics. It's a strong passion of mine.
Oh my gosh.
Not juicy, pretty boring. Makes me sound fun at parties, huh?
I was about to say that sounds like a great topic
Aren't
for a
you
party.
dying to invite me over for dinner?
That is too funny. All right, well, the macroeconomics, microeconomics is not my strong suit, but I will tell you that I would be enthralled with listening to a conversation about that. Fantastic. Well, listen, one of the things that I was most impressed with is really the ability to take Scribe and you under your leadership to take the user base from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of users in only a 9 month period.
Yeah.
And I want to understand some of the sales and marketing strategies that you implemented to achieve that exponential growth and in such a short period of time. So talk about that if you would.
Yeah. I mean, this is the beauty of product led growth, right? which is it's really hard to get started. But once you get started and you get that flywheel going, it's quite magical. And your growth rates can look quite exponential because it really compounds over time. We have a sales driven part of our business, as you'd imagine, and then we sort of have our self-serve part of the business. And I've seen this across companies that I've invested in and companies that I know. Like the beauty of PLG and the self-serve motion is the graph can look exponential, whereas sales tends to be pretty linear, right? Which is like each salesperson I put in, I get X out the other side, right? And maybe I get a little better at that over time, but it's still kind of a linear graph.
Right.
And so what happens when you're able to marry those things together? Like, can you power up your sales team dramatically where you're getting that kind of exponential growth, but then you're able to pair it with sales where it's exponential growth, but you're actually getting some real ACV. One of the challenges with product-led growth is you tend to have much smaller ACV, right? You're focused on the difference between the two, if I were to kind of distill it down, is product-led growth, you're focused on the end user, which is oftentimes not the buyer. It's not the person who holds budget. It's not the person who's going to administer the product. And so the beauty of that is it can spread really quickly among individual users, right? I find Scribe or whatever tool to be really helpful to me personally. So I'm just going to use it and I'm going to share it with 5 other people. I'm going to send them a Scribe or I'm going to tell them to use Scribe because it makes their life really easy. Where somebody receive a Scribe and they say, "Oh wow, that was really cool. Like, how did that happen?" And then they become a user themselves. So you get this really great growth. But then the challenge is you got to think about, okay, well, how does that actually turn into a bigger contract other than these people using the free product or just swiping their credit card? And so that's really where that sales component kind of comes in. And so you hear a lot about product led growth, especially in the Valley, and it's kind of the biggest darling and buzzword. And there's many good reasons for that because it's really quite a magical emotion in terms of getting as many people to have their hands on and use your product and see value from the product. But it doesn't stop there. That's not the end all be all because to get to a scalable independent public company, you got to figure out how to layer on that sales motion to get your ACV higher.
So, love it on the PLG versus SLG, product led growth versus sales led growth. Understood. And you guys obviously have a mix of both. And this is some of like some of the great companies that are out there. Grammarly, as an example,
Mm,
Loom, Calendly, right? All of these applications, they all started out PLG. And one of the cool stories about Grammarly is they started out in 2009, but they didn't open their sales, the business division, which is the sales led growth part of the engine, until a few months before COVID started. Right. So,
right.
so that was 2009 to 2020. Like, wow, all PLG focus. And what we see happen inevitably with PLG focused companies is that uh, people within an organization now will start acquiring. Let's just take, I'm going to use IBM as an example. And you've got now 10,000 people in IBM that have personally purchased Grammarly. And now Grammarly can go in and see that data and turn around and go sell a license model that is one contract, one person to sign, as opposed to 10,000 people renewing. And that is a beautiful part of the sales led growth motion. But to get there to that SLG motion, you had to implement some specific sales and marketing tactics. Like, what were the things that got you from thousands to hundreds of thousands? What are the things that you did? Was it advertising? Was it more than advertising? Like, was it to tell some of those things that really made that growth happen in that 9 months?
Yeah. So the first and to your point, like it can often take a while, right? Because what you need with PLG is you'll often see feels like an overnight success when you look at it from the outside because you say, "Wow, I never heard about this tool before." And now I'm hearing about it everywhere. And then you dig in and you say, "No, actually, like they were growing for a long time, really kind of iterating the product and trying to dial it in." And so I would say it first starts, it sounds cliche, but it's very, very true. It first starts with building a magical product specifically designed for that end user. How do you make this product as easy to use, as high ROI, and ideally as viral as possible? Right. And so you're really engineering for an excellent first user experience that's incredibly low friction. We spend a lot of time thinking about how do we take friction out of activation. We clock this. It takes the average user 4 minutes from the moment they land on our site for the first time to when they're able to create and share their first scribe, which is when they get value from scribe, right? 4 minutes. And we're always trying to do everything we can to bring that down as much as possible. So, how do you make it really, really easy for people to see the value, get to the aha moment, however you define it, of your product as quickly as possible? And then ideally you build in these viral loops, these sharing loops within your product, right? Within Scribe, it's quite natural, which is I only ever create a Scribe. A Scribe's an automatic step-by-step guide to share it with someone else, right? I'm not creating guides to tell myself how to do something I already know. I'm creating a guide because someone has a question, or I anticipate someone's going to have a question, or I'm trying to show a customer, how to use my software, right? And so I send someone a Scribe, and you scroll down on the bottom of that Scribe and it says, hey, actually, Jennifer created this in 56 seconds. That's the average time it takes to create a Scribe. Are you interested in learning to do this yourself too? Right. And you can click and become a user yourself. So it's quite obvious for us. You think about like Loom, for example, quite obvious for them too. You send someone a video. Do you want to respond to that video? There's a lot of these obvious and maybe less obvious loops that are available in products. So I think it really starts with dialing in just a great user experience that naturally leads itself to expansion. And then you think about, how do I drive as many people into the front door of my product as possible? Right? I want as many people who sort of fit my target persona, my target end user, to come through the front door of my product and get to that aha moment as quickly as possible. And then ideally they go and share with their networks as well. And so you want to orient all of your marketing around finding out where those people live. Are there particular communities they hang out in? Are there particular channels that they go to? And it's really going to depend on who your persona is and where they discover new tools. And in the early days, your audience base will gear towards people who like to try new things, right? And so you can almost go to generic things like Product Hunt or whatever else when you're first getting started, and just like kind of put it out there and see who are the people who gravitate to it. It might be who you think, it might not be who you think, right? And then go do user interviews with those people and understand, like, who are you? Why did you start using my product? What do you think's really interesting? What feedback do you have? What are you using this for? And then you dial in and tweak the product, and then you can start to pattern match. Okay, what makes my users, what makes them special? It could be something really obvious. Oh, they're all salespeople. Or it could be something demographic, or it could be something psychographic, right? They're all productivity nerds. They're all no code enthusiasts, whatever it might be. And then you got to go figure out, where do those people live and how do I deliver my message to them?
So if you think about your guys' success, what portion came from the viral loops that you talked about, right? The virality, which is in your guys' case, somebody would take Scribe, use it, send somebody else a Scribe to view and look at. And by the way, for people's context, describe Scribe. What does it do, by the way? So this, I forgot to mention that.
Yeah.
Like, we're talking about it. Let's talk about what it does, and then let me finish my question.
Yeah, because then maybe it'll make a little bit more sense what I'm saying. So Scribe's a desktop application or Chrome extension, and you hit the record button and you just do a process. I generate my quarterly sales report. Hit record, generate your quarterly sales report. When you're done, you hit stop record. Scribe will auto generate step-by-step written instructions with screenshots on how to do that process, how to generate a quarterly sales report. And you can now share that Scribe in a number of different ways with whomever you want, right? Whether you've got a teammate that you're onboarding, whether you just constantly get asked a question from your teammate on how to do something, whether you have a customer who wants a walkthrough on how to do the trial, they're doing a POC, how do I do this in the product? Or I'm in customer success and they're asking me to help them troubleshoot something. Anywhere someone has a question on how to do something. And there are a bunch of things that we have in product to help people who have questions on the other side to discover the content that they need at the moment they have the question in the context of that question. So the whole idea with Scribe is never spend any more time explaining yourself. Like, don't do copy paste screenshots and writing out SOPs. Don't hop on another Zoom. Don't respond to another shoulder tap or someone saying, hey, can you just show me how to do something? Scale that information. Don't do it one off, scale it. Hit record, do what you need to do. It'll automatically generate documentation where now your know-how is scalable across infinite number of people. We've turned your know-how into media automatically.
Such a brilliant solution to something that I live with every day. And I'm sitting here and I'm looking at manuals, I'm looking at step-by-step guides, processes. It's pretty brilliant. Okay, so back to now that you've explained that, which totally makes sense in terms of how there's a need in the marketplace. You've solved that need with, in this case, Scribe. And then you start to build users. Okay, great. So now we look at scaling from thousands to hundreds of thousands. the viral loop you talked about. That is enabling the application so that it can be viral. You take the scribe, someone it records the scribe, it produces a documentation, SOP, visuals, images, etc. Now you share that with somebody else, and do they have to now set up an account in order to be able to view the scribe as well?
They do not.
Okay.
No.
So what they're looking at is the message that came through that said, hey, so and so did this. And they're seeing the scribe and they're like, wow, that was pretty cool, right? And they did it in 56 seconds. So you're giving somebody the opportunity to say in their mind, oh my God, I do this all the time. I would love to be able to do this too. And then they set up their own scribe account and then they tell Johnny and Susie and Billy and Bobby, etc. And that is one of the areas of, well, that's how PLG is made, right? So was that like the biggest component of what drove user activations, or was there something else, or was it a combination?
It's always a combination is the short answer. Pretty much anything you look at is a combination. But that's one of the biggest ones, right? Which is, and we'll often see with our users that it's a few touch points, kind of like sales, right? You find you need a few touch points. We'll ask people when we do interviews, hey, how did you hear about Scribe? And they'll, oh, well, someone sent me a Scribe or I saw a Scribe. You can embed Scribe in hundreds of different applications. So they'll be like, I went to a website, like Washington Post has a scribe on their site. I was on some website and I like saw a scribe and I thought, oh, that's cool. And then I didn't think about it much more. And then my colleague sent me a scribe, or like my colleague was telling me, I heard word of mouth about how they were using scribe and it was really helpful to them. And so what's beautiful about this is you get all of these kind of compounding effects that reinforce each other over time. So with PLG and certainly with Scribe, anytime someone is creating and sharing a Scribe with someone else, that is marketing for us, right? Our users are our marketing. Whether they're sharing content that they've created that shows off the product and really this format, we talk about Scribe as becoming the default language for how people share how to. There's no default right now. If you ask me a question, hey Jennifer, how do I add a lead in Salesforce? I don't know. Maybe I'm sending you an email. Maybe we're hopping on a Zoom and I'm showing you. Maybe I'm writing out a guide for you. We envision a world where I just send you a scribe and that's the default for it. So anytime any one of our users does one of those actions, doesn't matter if they never pay us $1, it's helping us get to that version of the world where they're spreading scribe as a standard, right? And other people are then able to see it. And so you want to be doing everything, like when we think about pricing and packaging, or even as we're thinking about product decisions, you could look at our free tier and say, like, it's incredibly generous and liberal. And yes, it is. And it's because we say, great, we want as many people to get as much value from Scribe as possible. So go create. Please create scribes, like give us feedback on how to make it better, share it with other people, have them see value from it and share it with their friends. And so you want to get these compounding loops where it's just all about getting as many people to use and talk about your product with other people.
And curious, you obviously knew that was the focus, but early on, did you have a co-founder that was the marketer or the growth marketer, or is this something that you hired an agency, or did you just sit down in a room with everybody and you said, what are we going to do and how do we do it? And this was all ideation that came about.
We're very product oriented. So when we started the company, I raised a very, very small amount of money. We were 4 or 5 times oversubscribed for it. And I said, no, I want to raise small amount of money. And I want to build a really basic MVP. I want to hire a very small team of just engineers. And I want to get it out into the world and see what people do. So we didn't hire, the team was me and 5 engineers for the first year and a half.
Right.
Because we're just iterating on product, right?
Right.
And like getting it out there and tinkering and understanding, like, how are people using this? What are they doing? What do the loops look like? What's the behavior? And so there's no kind of magic marketing shortcut, frankly.
Right.
It's like design a great product that people love and want to use and creates value in their lives. And then it becomes about ruthlessly reducing friction so they can get to that aha moment as fast as possible. And then you use your marketing to pour gas on the fire, right? And say, okay, I already know now how someone comes through the product and has that magical experience and shares with others. So how do I just now create a megaphone,
Mhm.
either for myself or for my users, to be able to share more about how they're using it?
Yeah, and I personally love the concept of Scribe. I have not used it, but I absolutely will be using it. Uh, One question I have for you is I assume that after you record your screen and you show what you're doing, Scribe produces the documentation and any images associated that need to be done, and the step-by-step guide. I assume that you have the ability to do messaging from within the application to send out your Scribe. Is that correct?
Yeah, but people said you can send all kinds of ways, right? So people sometimes just send a link to it. And
Got it.
that's great. That's fine. Go share it in whatever context. We're not opinionated about how people should be sharing. We say we want to meet you in the place where you're already doing work.
Right.
Again, we're trying to reduce friction. We're not trying to say completely change all of your behavior about how you message and work with your coworkers, right?
Right.
We're saying, no, we're going to meet you where you're at. We're all about making your life easier and more scalable. And so, all right, you talk to people in Slack, great. Send them a link in Slack. You
Mm.
guys use Confluence, great. We have a direct integration with Confluence. You can put it there. You guys use Zendesk and hundreds of other SharePoint, hundreds of other tools, great. Scribe integrates with all of those too. So we've built really robust integrations as well, where we say like you can share in Scribe. That's where a lot of people do share, exactly as you're describing, but it doesn't have to live just there. It can live wherever it is you're doing work. And by
Mm.
the way, all these things sync together. So you have one single source of truth. You don't have a nightmare of version control problems, which I think we can all relate to.
So, talk a little bit about building out a sales team in a product-led growth company. What was the reason why you started implementing a SLG focus inside of a product-led growth organization? But before you answer that question, we're going to listen to this message from our program sponsor. Corn Ferry understands talent, and in the sales world, it's no different. Corn Ferry transforms sales teams using their world-class Miller-Hyman methodology, employee assessments, benchmarking, and talent advisory capabilities to increase win rates and quota attainment. Corn Ferry offers Corn Ferry Sell, a sales effectiveness app available in App Exchange and App Source that helps your sales team develop and replicate powerful sales strategies that help sellers win more deals and crush their quotas. Learn more at cornferry.com/sales effectiveness. That's cornferry.com/sales effectiveness. Right before that break, I mentioned to you about what was the reason why you started implementing a SLG focus inside of a product-led growth organization.
Yeah. We would get so a couple things. One, you'll get really interesting leads who come through the door. We'll have senior people at Fortune 500 companies who will reach out to us and say, hey, I work with a vendor and they just sent us a scribe on how to do something. And then I clicked through to your website and this looks really compelling. I'd love to learn more. Or, hey, someone on my team was like just showing me something, and I saw a scribe and I thought that was really cool. Like, I'd love to talk about how this can apply my business. And so you'll always have folks at companies who want to talk to a salesperson. And you could be like Atlassian and say, no, I'm just gonna really push people through my product, and that is what it is. But we made the choice where we said, look, we want to meet users and buyers where they're at. And so if you want to talk to a salesperson and you sort of fit the right, sort of the right size and qualifications, like great, we're happy to use that and talk you through. The big kind of change or difference, none of our salespeople had worked in a product-led sales capacity before. Very few have, right? It's relatively new. And the big change that we really had to kind of push with them on is push people through the front door of the product. You have a conversation with them, say, okay, great. Next step, try the product. Here's the link to the free version. Go ahead, knock yourselves out. Call me back in 2 weeks when you've had a chance to try it with your team. Right. And that kind of runs very counter to a lot of
For
sales
sure.
instincts.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
It's all about how do you just give away as much value as quickly as possible. And it's the same. It's really the same as what you're trying to do with your PLG motion of get people to experience value as quickly as possible. So great. Go through the front door of our product, experience value. If you still need to talk to a salesperson because you need, we've got special enterprise grade features because you need enterprise grade features, or you have a special procurement process, or sort of any of the things that drive kind of needing to have a sales conversation, We're here for you. We're happy to meet you where you need it. But you can try the product. You're welcome to. Where that's kind of the front door and the way that you have a conversation with us.
Fabulous. So now within Scribe, how many sellers do you guys have today?
5.
Okay. And I would assume that they're being fed from really taking in what's called an inbound strategy.
Yeah.
That is taking the product-led growth activations, looking at data that says very similar to what LinkedIn did, right? So if you look at LinkedIn, they walked into, this is what happened when I was in the VP of sales role, that I was working at a collaboration company. They came in, they said, you have 350 sellers. Right now, you've got 120 of them that are already purchasing LinkedIn Premium at $79.99 a month. What if we sold you Sales Navigator, which is way more powerful of a tool, at $69.99 a month, but you buy the license for them? Would that be a benefit, right? And so that was like, wow, I never thought about that. And what do I get and that they don't already have? And then you see these differences, right? So very similar to how LinkedIn
And
is.
a number of our sellers come from LinkedIn. So we're quite familiar with that playbook.
Okay. So that there it is right there. So that was really ultimately my question is how are you, what does the sales motion look like? Is it mining the data that looks like that rolls up in terms of all of the users at a specific company? Is it the inbound? Like what does that sales motion look like for those guys?
Yes, it's both. It's both of those things. And it's not outbound. Very, very, very little outbound, almost none. And it's really like folks, because we say like, why would we take the time to try to go educate the market? It's
Right.
easier to take people who've already tried our product and expressed some interest in it, right? And have already experienced some of that value. And so, one of the things you see PLG companies climb the curve of on sophistication is understanding when is the right tipping point in the data to go reach out and have one of those conversations. I think Dropbox kind of famously talked about how they had like a 10% tipping point where as soon as they saw like 10% of the company or so was using Dropbox, that was the time to go have a conversation with the CIO and say, gosh, you have all of this this gray software out there, like shadow software out there. Don't you want to standardize this together on one contract where you have control and can set the permissions and sort of the kind of classic pitch. Slack very famously did this as well.
Yeah, gotcha. Interesting. Which requires that you got to have a lot of data and analytics. So actually, you had some early experience in operations. Talk a little bit about how the ops side of your thinking, your mind, and your experience lent itself to success and the sales side.
Yeah. So it's a different way of training reps too, right? To say like now you've got to actually look at the data. So when they're having a conversation with a customer, I say, oh, okay, great. What does their usage look like today? I know they reached out and said they want to talk to you. Great. Let's look at their usage. Let's understand who are the internal champions and advocates of this, right? Who's using this today? Who got started on it? How has it spread? What are the different orgs? And what's interesting is you often find, everyone talks about kind of PLG as the end all be all. And I have a pretty strong point of view that sales plays a very important role in this world because there's a big disconnect actually between what an end user wants and what they're looking for, and ultimately a buyer and an admin, right? They're solving different problems. And so the best kind of products solve a problem for the end user, but also have a compelling pitch to the buyer and the admin. And I'm kind of opinionated here and probably would be different than others where, I think like Slacks and others of the world will say the value to the organization is just the sum of all of the individuals who are getting value from it. Right. And so shouldn't you just kind of standardize on one contract and kind of have control? It's sort of like the stick, the stick way of selling. And I actually think it's really compelling when you have a carrot, which is the way that we like to talk about Scribe, which is, hey, all of these people are using Scribe, and that's because it makes their lives easier. And that's very intentional. We designed this product to be something that you as a user would use, not because your boss told you you needed to, which is the way traditional software is sold, but because you wanted to. But now when I go and talk to your boss or your manager, whomever the person is who owns the budget for this, the story is quite different, which is, isn't it great that all of these people happen to be creating scribes? Like they're finding value from it, and that's great. But now think about the value to your organization. You have all of this info that's living in one place. You've never had process documentation at this level before, right? Less than 1% of the processes in any company are actually documented. What if that number was 25%, 50%, 75%, right? As you kind of climb this curve, what is it that you could do differently? And so you're having quite a different conversation with the buyer at that point, which is not a kind of scare tactic of you have all these people using this shadow IT. It's a like think about all of the value you could be getting from this. Like, yes, it's great that these people have chosen to use it themselves, but now there's hundreds of thousands of dollars of value that could accrue to you as an organization just by the fact these people happen to already be using it.
Um, so interesting. Recently, in some discussions with investors, they absolutely know that we're fundraising. They absolutely know that we're focusing on a PLG strategy. You and I talked about that with Fly Message. Um,
Are
and
you finding it's like catnip for investors? They love PLG.
yeah, yeah. Well, so essentially, it's interesting. A lot of investors, and I think I need to start finding different types of investors. A lot of folks have that we've spoken to have like the PLG, but a lot of folks want to see that enterprise play. They want to see where the
Mm,
enterprise, because that's the big dollars, right? And that's what they're looking for. But interesting, I had a conversation with an investor recently, and they saw that in our plan that we had a few sales folks that was forecasted for our strategy. And they pushed back and said, why would you have that? PLG is all about driving the users to onboard themselves and self-service. You shouldn't have that. And I said, whoa, wait a minute, hold on. Yes, you do have that, because you're going to have customers who come in all the time that look like and end up with a roll up. Case in point, how I started this whole process and converting my company, Vengreso, in from a training company into a PLG focused company was because of one company by the name of PillPack. PillPack is an online digital pharmacy.
mhm.
One day I got an alert that 35 online digital pharmacists came through and onboarded themselves to Fly Message. Okay, wait a minute. So in that model, out of 35 folks, it was like, could we go out and put this on an enterprise license and allow corporate sharing inside the model? Yes, of course you can. And yes, you should do those types of things. So that was a great way for us to be able to look at triggering how to engage a salesperson. Another example,
That's a
we
great
just
example.
thank you. We just launched July 27th of this year, right? July 27th.
So
We
your month anniversary is tomorrow
It's tomorrow. I'm like,
from
I'm
our
still, I'm
recording
not even
date.
I'm not even 30 days old yet, right? So we just launched, and out of the gate, kid you not, 3 contracts, 150 licenses sold in 3 contracts
Yeah,
out of the gate, right?
that's
And
great.
that would not have happened in the model that it was one by one by one by one, right? Someone came in, said, I see the value. I hate copy and paste, to your guys' point,
Yes,
right? I store
preach.
all my messages on Google Docs, Word Doc, OneNote, Evernote, Notepad, and everybody stores it in all different spots. And worse yet, some of my reps, in this case, sales reps, they store it in their sent folder, and they have to go back in, spend 10 to 15 minutes finding the old template, copy and paste
Mhm.
it, and they use it on different places. So I just want to buy 50 licenses, call it a day. Can I do that? And if we had not had that model in place, then we would not have capitalized on 150 licenses that will be deployed out in the next few months. That to me is the integration between PLG and sales-led growth. And for me, this is like normal, but for some of investors, they're like, hey, no, I want you to stay away from that. Just go after that individual, just scale the crap out of that thing. And by the way, I want to scale the crap out of it. Don't get me wrong, right? But that's where I've been having some challenges with some investors, and just like the focus, are you sales or are you product led? One of my challenges.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that at all because I think you'll find as many opinions on how to run a PLG company with or without sales as there are investors. And I think part of it is because this is a pretty still kind of nascent model. I mean, it isn't, it isn't. People have been doing PLG under another name for a long time, but sort of like this model at the scale that we're seeing it now is still kind of new. And so there are definitely some investors who will say it's all about bottoms up. Don't get any revenue for a while. Really, it's just about kind of scaling your user base and getting distribution, and the rest will come later. You can figure out how to monetize later, right? Slack famously didn't hire a sales team until they were at like 100 million ARR. Now, I would argue Slack is not an independent public company today. And one of the reasons is because they didn't figure out the enterprise. They got incredible distribution, incredible brand. They built arguably a good product, maybe great products. But they weren't able to crack the enterprise and so couldn't stand alone. And then you'll talk to investors who are used to kind of traditional enterprise sales, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, PLG, great. I've read about that. That's really great. That's very good. Yes, understand the power of it. Have you signed any six-figure contracts yet?" Right?
Exactly. I got that. And I was like, what?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
pre-sold what? Like what?
yeah. Yeah. So one of my favorite questions to ask when I talk to investors is like, what do you think is most important? And I'll get different answers depending on who I talk to. And so I think the takeaway there is there are many paths to success. You've got to figure out what's right for your business. When I started Scribe, I ran around and talked to a bunch of founders of companies that were farther ahead than we were that I admired, and I asked them for advice. And a common one was don't listen to advice. I had a founder of a very big prominent PLG company. He said to me, if I'd listened to my investors, my company would not have been successful.
Right,
I did a
right,
lot of things they told me not to do just because I really believed it was right. And because it's hard for anyone who's not living your business every day, doesn't, wake up in the morning with this vision in the back of their eyeballs every single day to really know what to do. So I'm not surprised you're getting differing advice. I think the best thing to do is you just figure out what you think your North Star is and what's right for your business and do that. I obviously have a strong bent towards believing that you need to have sales, and it's a bit of a pipe dream to say that you don't. All these companies will add it someday. And I think there's a question of like, they'll do great. Did they leave some more opportunity on the table without it?
yeah. I'm a big believer. Yesterday, I met with the development team, and I'm so excited, Jennifer. We scaled. We have a UI UX person now. We have a few a full stack and back end, front end, and we've got a solutions architect, and we got a software engineer for testing. So I'm getting all into this now, right? So and we're starting to scale. But that having been said, I had a conversation with them, and product-led growth, when we think about product-led growth, we talk about it in the format of sales, revenue, right? Driving dollars and cents. But you said something earlier, which is you were insanely focused on what was the word you said? The user experience, right? That
Hmm.
user experience. That also
Hmm.
is product-led development, right? Like if you think
Hmm.
about it from a development standpoint, what I said to the developers yesterday and the whole team was, what is going to drive the user to keep coming back and sharing and sharing and sharing. Think about that. And that is our North Star right there, right? From a development standpoint. And also, I will say, I'll tell you now, I'm 1 day behind my 30-day mark, but from July 27th till now, we've had a 17.6% conversion rate from freemium to paid.
That's
Uh,
quite high.
it is, and I'm so proud of that, but it's only 30 days. I don't want to get too excited, but I'm so
Yeah.
proud of it. That is good, right? Look at the average is about 4% in the industry. If you have a low price point, that you tends to go much higher. 20% is a really solid number, especially on those lower price points. Well, what's interesting though is we have two price points, like a $397 plan and a $997 plan, Jennifer, and majority of folks are picking the $997 plan.
Yeah.
And I'm amazed by that. But anyways, I was so excited about that. And so this whole conversation really about driving product-led growth to sales-led growth. I love what you guys are doing. And I love how you're thinking, you're aggressive in terms of your attack on the marketplace and your product. And the fact that you took on everything that you took on is just so impressive. Pregnant, is CEO, fundraising Series A and C, seed round. Like that's amazing. And it's really awesome. So well done there in terms of your success. We
Thank
only have
you.
a few
You're
more
you're
minutes.
you're 30 days in, but my experience is like there's kind of nothing else like it. It's such a wild ride, and building something that so many people use. It sounds like you guys have such amazing traction out of the gate already, and I expect that'll only continue to grow. Like having people in the wild, I get notes every day from users that are like, where has this been my whole life? This is so awesome. I just wanted to say kudos on building a great product, right? Or they share
Yeah.
a story about how it's like impacted them or helped them sell more, whatever the story is. And like that's why we do this, right? It's just
Yeah.
really fun. And to me, you can talk about product led growth has really great motion and leads to faster growing business and all these things. And that's wonderful and good. But to me, that's icing on the cake. You mean I get to build something and I build it for the users to have a great experience. Like I build it for as many people as possible to have a moment of magic in their day. What more do I want from work? That's great.
Exactly. Exactly. I love that. I love that. Listen, we have about 5 minutes left here, and I wanted to ask you about you know, just some strategies around productivity, how to boost productivity. What, and you can
Oh, one of
talk
my
about
favorite
this.
topics.
Yeah, you could talk about it from any angle, whether it's drive more sales, boost productivity internally. Clearly, Scribe is all about productivity and increasing the productivity market, which, by the way, is growing by leaps and bounds right now and forecasted to be, I think it's $122 billion within the next 6 years. So I don't know if Scribe is part of the PMS, which, by the way, that acronym is horrible. PMS, part of the PMS marketplace, productivity
Someone, we
management
need a
software.
branding person up in here.
Yeah, exactly. But talk a little bit about some strategies to boost productivity in any fashion, to drive more sales, to drive increase in user acquisition, etc.
Uh, I and we as a company are obsessed with finding leverage at every single point we possibly can. So at any moment you find yourself doing something that feels kind of manual, you should always ask yourself, how do I get more leverage here? How do I make this more scalable? And so there are many, many ways to do that. Kind of at a high level, I always think about how do I turn something from one-on-one into something that is media. That's either like software or media that scales, right? So scribes are an example of that. Like instead of as a team when we're onboarding someone new or we're deploying with a new customer, right? Instead of doing manual one-on-one, the same thing over and over again, we've created a scribe repository for it, right? And we just share that scribe with people. And over time, they learn to actually go and just find the scribe themselves. And they're not even asking the question. We don't even see it. It's questions averted at that point. So always finding like, where are these opportunities to get scale and leverage in your day where you're not doing something that can't be repeated? And we lean on the product to do as much of that as possible, right? So even something as simple as what I was saying, like make the front door your product, you saved so much time in a sales conversation, right? Where now it's no longer, hey, let me take a bunch of time and give you a demo and explain what we're up to. It's, hey, you've already taken that time. You know what this is. We're skipping that first meeting. We're jumping into what is traditionally a second or maybe even a third meeting because we'll often find that our users have had conversations with their teams already. They'll come in and say, I've been using Scribe for a week. I thought it was amazing. I took it to my team meeting. We all talked about how we could use it. And we have these 5 ideas we want to talk to you about. You're like, great. We're already on meeting number 3. Right. And then we're able to share scribes with you about how to use Scribe that now avoided meeting number 4. And so all of these places, like I'm ruthlessly obsessed in my day of finding all of these individual leverage points and never doing something that feels like it's just kind of one off.
So that is not just you, but that is a culture that you've implemented throughout the organization. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And as people find these things that were maybe there is a leverage point that you find something manual and they're like, it would be great if, what's that feedback loop look like internally to help further better the product or develop the product?
Yeah, we talk about what we're doing is building a rapid learning machine. I think any startup needs to be a rapid learning machine. It's all about how do we learn and iterate as fast as possible. And that's what we also do for our users, right? I'm always about, hey, how do we help our users learn? You figured out how to do something special or unique or valuable. Don't take the time to write it all down or explain it to other people. Like that's a waste of your time. The hard part was figuring out how to do something. Let's make it infinitely scalable and automatic with Scribe, right? So it's both the way that we work and also the change that we see ourselves making in the world. And so anytime someone learns how to do something, hey, I pitched differently to a customer and this really worked, or we had this feedback from this customer, they wanted to be able to do this instead. We've set up all these different channels in Slack, depending on the kind of feedback and who the audience is. And we now have the habit, as soon as that happens, it goes into Slack. And so now we have all of these conversations from, our sales team on, hey, I'm learning this, like this is the part of the story that really resonates to our product team. Hey, this is the feedback we're getting from users. Like they thought this was confusing in the demo, or, they've been using it for 5 months and they wish they had this feature instead. Or I was just doing a bunch of data analysis and I learned XYZ. That's constantly being shared and fed to the right people.
Wow, great
It's
idea.
this culture of like, if you've learned something and you didn't share it with someone else, it doesn't count.
Yeah, yeah. So interesting. I was just talking with my product development manager yesterday, And I said, we were talking about how to get this feedback loop in. And he said, well, we can just set up a Google form because sometimes you need the video, sometimes you need the image, and then we can be able to capture all of that. I actually didn't even consider the concept of setting up a Google chat or a Slack channel that would allow us to be able to bring that feedback loop in and to be able to store that. That's a really great idea. Jennifer, it's been really exciting to talk to you. It's very inspiring as well, especially given the place that Vengreso is at in terms of our journey and what we're doing. How do people connect with you? Is it LinkedIn, Twitter? What's the best way to reach out and connect with you?
I'm most active on LinkedIn, so you can find me there, Jennifer Smith, obviously. And then you can also find us at scribehow.com, scribehow.com. And feel free to try the product. Like I said, takes 4 minutes from the moment you hit, get started, and it's completely free. For listeners who want to get a free trial of the paid version, they're welcome to do so. I'll share a promo code that you can give to your listeners as well.
Okay, and what's that promo code?
Modern Selling.
Modern Selling. Oh, all right.
Easy to remember, right?
Very easy to remember. Kind of like the Modern Selling podcast.
Wonder where we got it from.
Hey, that's great marketing right there. Yeah. All right. Use the Modern Selling promo code. Go to scribe.how.
Scribehow.com.
I'm sorry, scribehow.com. We'll put that into the show notes. And remember, Scribe is basically a screen capture tool that turns any process into a step-by-step guide. You got to get out there. You got to use it and keep on sharing. That's an amazing story. Jennifer, it has been fabulous to connect with you here, but I do have one final question for you, and that is your all-time favorite movie. And by the way, I know that you're in babyhood still, and you may not be watching a whole lot of movies, but in the coming months, I promise you'll be watching a lot of Disney movies.
Look forward to that taking over my life. Yeah, I definitely have to think back to pre-kid, the last time that I sat and watched the screen. There's this fabulous documentary called Euro Dreams of Sushi. Have you seen it?
No, I have not.
I highly recommend it. Maybe not the most enthralling documentary, but I think an incredible message. It's about a sushi chef in Japan who runs one of the most renowned sushi restaurants in the subway of Japan. And he is absolutely obsessed, singularly obsessed with the craft of making excellent sushi. You could just, you watch the documentary, you can tell like this man has built his life, decades, around just being able to slice the perfect piece of fish. And I think it's just an incredible story about being really dedicated to being excellent at your craft. We talk a lot at Scribe about, our sort of whole people philosophy is finding people who are great at what they do and people who want to be excellent at it and want to do that at Scribe. And so I really love this idea of people who love their craft and want to be great at it. And I think Euro is the absolute epitome.
Reminds me of something I use in my pitch with investors as well, as a little background to myself. And that was when I was growing up, my father always said, I came from a poor Latino family. My dad was a truck driver. My mom was a stay-at-home with 5 kids, mom. And my dad always said something to me that I use to this very day. He said, no matter what, mijo, no matter what you do, just be the best at it. And such a great statement, a powerful statement, but also just now it drives everything that I do. And sometimes it can be a little overbearing because you're looking for that perfection and you got to dial that, that moment down between perfection and what's really still great. But I love what you just said. Fabulous. That's the first time we've had that on the show in terms of that documentary. So for all of you listening in right now, make sure you reach out to Jennifer Smith at Scribe and reach out and connect with her. Tell her you heard her on the Modern Selling podcast. And for those of you that are going to download and try the license, make sure you use the coupon code Modern Selling. Make sure you use the coupon Modern Selling. And don't turn that dial just quite yet. Make sure you listen to this very important message right now. Korn Ferry sales effectiveness solutions are increasing win rates by over 20%. Find out how they can help your sales team. Visit kornferry.com/sales effectiveness. That's kornferry.com/sales effectiveness. Thanks for listening to the Modern Selling Podcast. Please do me a huge favor and give the Modern Selling Podcast a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. Oh, and don't forget, if you'd like to save 20 hours or more in a month and increase your productivity, go right now and download Fly Message, that's flymsg.io, for free. It's your free text expander and personal writing assistant. Hey, thanks for listening in, and until the next episode, good selling.